Thank you, Program Director, for those words. Acting DG Swane, the senior management of the DSTI, and esteemed colleagues. It's great to present the findings of this research to you this morning. As Mboneni says, I am passionate and I do get carried away about research. So if somebody's going to be listening to the results of studies, which for the researchers in the room, you know the number of hours that it takes to think about something and to write about something. So I'm very pleased to present those results to you this morning. The program director was, you know when you're doing a presentation and you just have this amount of time, and I said, I can't do all those introductory comments, and you have presented well in terms of why this study is important and what's the notion about science and the relationship with society. So in terms of this presentation, you've all received this. We conducted this study and produced this report, which you all have, and I am absolutely certain that you've read all 200 pages, and you know what's going there. I'm just going to give you a little bit like a hors d'oeuvre of it. So it's there, and we also have produced, and talking about science engagements, it's very important to communicate science. And of course, and when you think about communicating science, you want to look at a number of audiences. Now, everybody, I know you, as I said, you've read it, but not everybody is going to read this. So we also produced a little booklet with lots of pictures, and they on your table. And we said, you can have it. The criteria was that you can complete reading it over a cup of coffee, because it's a information-filled world and everybody's busy, so you don't have the time to do the. Then of course, once you've read that, you'll want to read the longer report. So we have these reports, and they are both on the HSRC Press and the DSTI website. Again, remembering communication of science is very important, and not everybody wants to read the reports in English. So we've translated these reports into nine other languages. I think that's 9. And all these reports are on the website. So we take very seriously what we found in the studies or what's in the literature. So in terms of this presentation, I just want to start off with, what's the policy environment that drove this study? Then look a little bit about the theoretical dimensions of it that underpin the study, and then I want to go straight into the results. And the idea of the results would be to give you snippets of what we found in this study. And I'm very pleased about the way this conference is constructed in terms of having 5 inputs from people that have not been part of this community before. And it's been really, I'm waiting to hear how they perceive what our thinking is, because it can be very insular when you're in your own community and you think that everything's great. So you're going to have those inputs, and then the time to engage with the study and to look at what you want to do further will be in those groups. So mine is very high level and very snippety. So in terms of the policy environment, if there are a couple of us that are older than that threshold age of 60 in this room, and we were all chatting. But if you read the old documents, and please, for young people, history is important. Read where things come from. And if you look at the green paper of 1996 for the then Department of Science, DAX, Arts, Culture, Science and Technology, it is really impressive, and it's this kind of Browning paper that's digitized, that's there. And right from the beginning, and of course with South Africa's history, it made a commitment that the national system of innovation would focus both on big science, which would then support economic development like manufacturing, agriculture, what have you, but it would also have a commitment to improve the lives, how science and technology would improve the lives of individuals. And remember 1994, important questions were what kind of toilet systems we could have, what kind of water systems that could become affordable and every person could have access to this. So the idea of the public and science and that interface has been around right from 1994. And through the years, the DSI has had a number of science engagement and awareness activities. Initial phase focused more on the schooling youth. Lebs Bashlela is here. And towards the latter part, it has been to look at the public, a broader public, and there are various documents and that they've prepared which sets the framework for this kind of work, and it's all found in there. And this led to and I want to draw attention to the 2019 white paper on science, technology, and innovation, and what's the policy intent with regard to the public and science. And within that white paper, it states explicitly that the DSI, it's important to support, we need to aspire towards a science literate and a science aware society. And DDG, you refer to evidence-based. And it's particularly important now for people to understand and to work out which so-called fact is evidence-based and which is a mistruth. I can think of lots of words to use it. I'm trying to be polite in this setting. I'm forced to be polite in this setting. But the aspiration for this kind of work and the work that we do is towards the science literate and science aware society, because we are so, we know the value of science. And the DSTI said it would do this by increasing the reach of science awareness initiatives, and you'll be discussing that, and increasing access to science and technology information. We'll look at whether how far it's gone with that. Further, the DSTI said, put itself on the, exposed itself and said, not only we'll do that, but we'll measure. We want to know how well we are succeeding, because it's very easy to say we're going to do this, and think only about the inputs into a system. It is very important to also see whether we are achieving what we set out to achieve, and measurement is important. And people like me and other researchers and mathematicians, Ketty and others, with the numbers, we have to, I mean, when you measure, you've got nowhere to hide. You've got to look at it and say, this is what we've achieved or not. So the DSTI put itself out there and said, to assess progress in achieving this desired science literate and science aware society, they advocated, firstly, for a set of indicators to measure the success of science engagement, to measure that. And secondly, to conduct a survey every 5 years, and this has been an ongoing discussion between researchers and the DSTI on the perceptions of science. And those are the two things. And the DSTI asked the Human Sciences Research Council as one of its entities to conduct the survey. I led the survey with a number of researchers in the HSRC. I led that survey, and it's a study which is a collaboration, and my counterpart, Isaac Ramova, on the side of the DSTI, he was very much involved in making sure the policy intents and the fundings, etc., are there. So we see this output as a collaborative study. Now, so that's the policy area. Let's just touch a bit into the theoretical. Well, we're talking about public relationship with science, but essentially we're talking about science and society, and there's science and there's society. And in the, say, during the 40s, 50s, or in the past, the distance between science and society was very wide. Science, especially after World War II, and with all the science and engineering feats in inverted commas, the scientists felt that they were autonomous and had no accountability to anybody. And so, but in the 50s, 60s, there was a reaction and mistrust of science, both globally, and we know the history of science in South Africa and the mistrust of what was being produced there. And it was very important to also look at society. And it's so there's science and society and this interface. And what we're going to be presenting is what's happening in that interface and how do we define that interface. Just to say, when we talk about science, and I want to declare up front, we're talking about knowledge and information that's been generated through evidence or logic, and it refers to both the natural and sciences and health sciences, as well as social science and humanities. I know if we didn't do that, it's wrong not to do that, so I just want to make sure that I put it up front, that we're using the term science in a broader kind of sense. We understood that science is important for economic, social, personal development, and therefore these areas are very important. And the society, when we're talking about society in this study, in this place here, it's those things that we can measure. And so we've chosen a couple of things like age and intergenerational attitudes and views as a very big factor. Gender, race, socioeconomic status, the employment status, which is linked to socioeconomic, religiosity, because if you're talking about science, you have to see how this fits in. Spoiler alert, religiosity didn't turn to be, we expected it to be a big factor. It wasn't a big factor in shaping attitudes. And then you had education level and culture. So those are the things. And as I said, we are interested in this interface. So what's this interface then? And it is a social construct. And if we want to measure what's the social construct, we needed to define what it was. And we took a position that if we're looking at this thing between science and society, we use the word relationship, because it implies a dialogical interaction in that science affects society and society affects science. So it's a dialogical relationship. And then we set out to define, firstly, what would form the texture of this interface, and then to define it, and then we had to measure it. In order to define it, we looked through the literature, we looked through policy, we had a number of stakeholder meetings, and we've come up with this set of what we called, we defined 7 indicators and 27 measures that are used within this report. Of course, you have to think about it, and it's on your, it's on that table as well. And the broad areas of the indicators that we chose was knowledge, and we looked at knowledge about science and technology and the environment. And DDG, you referred to about other, like climate change and other kinds of things. So we measured around that. We measured interest, because if you're not interested in science and technology, then of course you're not going to be bothered about anything else, and we wanting to get towards a science literate society. So the interest, we have some measures there. Then we looked at what we call the promise and reservation indicators. Now, again, there's a global set of indicators about promise. Do you see the benefits of science, or what are your benefits and concerns? And again, we took the position that we had to find promise and reservation of both modern science and traditional science, DDG. So you've referred to that, as you said. Science is in around us, and we use it every day. We might not name it as such, but and traditional knowledge or indigenous knowledge is acknowledged through all our, fortunately, it's acknowledged through all our policy dimensions, and we recognize its importance. So we said we must measure it as well. Then we looked at trust issues. Now, if you want people to buy into science, and they've got to trust that information. In other areas we talk, I'm sure Prof. Boyson will talk about trust deficits in other areas, but we wanted to see what was the trust in both in science, the information that you were getting, so we measured that. I'm trying to read my writing there. Oh yes, sorry, I can't read the slide there. So, as we said earlier, in order to shape these attitudes and views, science and technology information is very important, so we asked about science and technology information. Then we asked about science engagements. To what extent did you participate in various activities? And we extended that to say more than just the outcomes, more than just going to science engagements. What are your views about science? How do you, and in these views, we talked about pride. We find that pride is a very important indicator, because if you have pride in your national system of innovation, and you would more likely to be supporting it, you're more likely to know about it. So we had those as indicators. I read in one of the documents where it said something that this conference was going to look at our contribution, our academic contribution. I think, Isaac, that was there, to international literature. And there is a contribution. In our context, these we found to be more the set of indicators that are suitable to us than what's in other countries. Using those indicators, we created an instrument with 200 items. Again, the back of your big report gives you the whole instrument so you can see what we've done. We then, of course, collected data. We collected data from we went to 6,000 households. The South African Social Attitude Survey, one of the big surveys in the HSRC, they undertook these surveys. And in this, we collected data and what we defined as adults from 16 years old and above. That was our population. And we had a nationally representative sample. We did interviews for an hour, and the instrument again was in all languages, and the respondent could just choose which language they wanted to respond to. This was captured, and then the data was weighted, and we have our results. It's taking me longer to do this. In our results, and I want to report on a couple of things, we computed average scores for each of those 27 measures. And then we extended that to say, which again is brand new, it's the first time this kind of analysis is done. I think inequality is so much in our DNA that we said, what's the variation? Because if you have, there's an average score of 50, what does that mean? You want to kind of have, what's the lowest score, the highest score? So the variation tells you more about our population and our public. So we identified score variations, and we'll present those results. Now, let's come to the results themselves and say something. Knowledge, interest, and pride in science and technology. The first thing is that Stats South Africa tells us what's about the education levels in the country. So many percent have matric and above, so many percent tertiary, etc. In our survey, we pushed that further to ask about what's the we didn't want to say competence there of it, but were you exposed to any science, maths, or subjects post grade 9? And we've used it as exposure. 3/4 of our public of 16 years and over did take at least one of science, biology, or mathematics, and about 33% took all 3 subjects. So it gives us some indicator. I should have also said these, and I did say that it's going to be conducted every 5 years. So this is baseline information, and in 5 years' time, we hope that these numbers increase. We asked about their awareness of science and technology. Awareness is slightly different from knowledge in that you know about something, but you don't have the underlying conceptual understanding. 60% of our population said they were aware of science and technology. Interest, 2/3, that's 66%. So they want DG science and technology. So this department is very important in terms of what the public wants. I should also say, I don't have it in the slide, but we asked them, what do you think about government funding for S&T? And I think about 75% said it should be kept the same or increased. So here's your argument when you go to cabinet. This is the public saying that. 70% of our adults were proud of science and technology. And this is something that's not in all countries. Many countries, you have these anti-science movements as well. Now, if we're talking about science, we want, and the formal knowledge is produced by scientists, so we wanted to know what is the, what's the trust? Do you trust the scientists? Because if you do, you'll believe their information. And you see from those two slides, I can't see there at all, that 3/4 agreed and feel that science makes life better for people, and science provides the answers that explains the world we live in. So this is the population saying, this is the views, like you said, of our public. So 3/4 said that. Concern, only half thought that scientists were honest about the work. And I think it's something that we should take forward, because if there's the older adults would have gone through the abusive science period, so maybe that or what have you. But this is the perception of science. The NRF would have to take up a finding like that, and how you go, or ASAF and other universities, how are you going to change that? What's the reservations that they have about science? Concern was too much information, you don't know what to believe. And I think we can all relate to that, 70%. Scientists keep their work secret, 65%. Scientists sometimes harm people or animals, 62%. And I think that's worrying. If these are the perceptions of scientists, we need to be aware. The studies serve it, but we can't explain what it is. But this gives us an idea. What we also needed to know, what's their confidence or trust in the institutions that produce the information. It's very pleasing to know that 71% of the public believed in the universities and research organizations. So universities and research organizations, I think you're in a good position to claim your space and to defend your space. That's, in terms of science and technology information, they have great trust. There was less trust in, of course, our universities and research organizations are knowledge producers, but there's less trust in the national government, traditional leaders, or local government for science and technology information. It might be overall trust, or it might be, how they differentiate. But it tells us something as you debate in your fields. Who should be putting out this information, and the extent through which universities, scientists should be in the forefront of sharing information, because they have the starting point of having trust in that information. And we saw that during the COVID period. One can't not talk about America on some things. But if I looked at this is the South African view, and in general, most countries, they have a strong trust in universities. But the one thing that about the Americans, and so you have 75% of Americans trust in universities, but it's the only country that you have a divergence because of political ideology. 88% of Democrats versus, 66% of Republicans trust in the information. It's interesting, the Pew Research Center in America conducts studies, and one of the, like we have age, race, gender, and what have you, there is a question about your political affiliation that they have. That's a big part. So it goes to show how, in particular contexts, these things play out differently. What about the promise and reservation towards science? And again, we had a battery of items about promise, and in general, 3/4 that they makes it life healthier, easier, more work opportunities. If you go down that slide, it's just 58% that say the benefits of science and technology are greater than the harmful effects. So it does change a bit. if we look at reservations, the reservations that they have, that it makes our life change too fast. I think that's the discussion we have in families. That the new technologies will result in people losing job, and the scientific advances tend to benefit the rich more than the poor. And so those two, and it's a big warning sign if we look now going towards AI and the rest of it. Do not forget that we don't have the same education levels than European countries and American countries, and what's going to happen to the people that we leave behind. This is what the population is worried about. We also know that we depend too much on science and not enough on religion, 62%. So people want that balance. Just watching time. Then we asked about promise and reservation of traditional science. And we see from this that they are more in tune with small-scale farming and the use of traditional knowledge in that. But when it comes to treating illnesses and health issues, they prefer modern science and going to your doctor rather than the traditional healer. Now, so we've got all of that, and we wanted to know who did what, who felt this way. We wanted to break down the analysis a little bit more, and we have that. So we took, like I showed you the indicators in the beginning, and we broke it down. Oh, something happened on that red on the left-hand side. The people that had the highest scores were students, learners, and this is who has higher and lower promise attitudes. Students, those that have high education, young people, those that had more education support, higher SES, those people, those characteristics, they saw higher promise in science. On the other end, on the right-hand end, those that are poorer, those that are older, less education, lower SES, and the colored community saw lower promise for science. We had similar kind of findings for reservation. Now, if we looked at the variation from those that had the highest to the lowest, there's a 10-point. It's a very narrow variation. So it would seem, irrespective of our socio-demographic backgrounds, South Africans are fairly consistent in the way they see the promise and reservation of science. And remember that, because I'm going to present something that comes up again. You asked about, well, what do the people think? I think we had done the survey in 2022 or so, and before the election we could have presented these to say to political parties, this is what the research that the public wants. It's energy supply, like electricity, cleaner and better water supply, quality of education, access to good quality food. This is the lived experiences of the public and what they wanted more research on. The area that was, for them, the least concern was stars and space and SKA and advanced technologies. Now, I know as government, you've got to balance both the immediate needs and be forward-looking, but and you've got to sell your forward-looking to the public. I think I've got another 5 minutes. So let's look at the access to information. And quickly, 94% of these adults had a cell phone, 61% a smartphone, which means in terms of dissemination of information, this is happening there. 3/4 of households had some sort of internet access. Who uses the internet more? Again, we've ran this variation. The ones that use the internet more, those with higher education, higher SES, students, learners, 16 to 24. No surprises there. Who used it less? Those with primary education, lower SES, and older. But what's different with the first one is that the variation is very, very wide. It's now 70-point variation, which means the society is highly diverse. Surprise? No, because this is a resource-based indicator. And somehow when resource comes into it, we show our differences far more. To quickly take you to 2 more slides, and I'll start rounding up. We wanted to know which are the areas that the population trusted in news contents and information sources. The biggest trust is news about sports. People trust sports. health, education. They least trust news about politics and political parties or local community. Science and technology falls in the middle. And again, if we are trying to promote science and technology information, I think we can learn from sports on how they do. I mean, I'm not a sports fan, but I listen to those broadcasts. I think they're so elegant in the way they present it, and they present history. I really enjoy listening to SAFM or those sports broadcasters. They do a very good job. Now, if we in science and technology can take a couple of lessons from there, I think it'll be very good. The information sources that they trust most is television and radio. And that gives us a strong signal if we want to communicate messages. Which are those channels that we should use? Less so the social media and online chat groups. I'm sure by age it will show a different picture, and so you have to be specific on that. Now, if we bring it all together, what does it all mean? So we had 27 indicators, and in terms of their average score, it had this picture, some at very high averages and some very low averages. In terms of the variation, this was the picture, some very varied and some very low variation. And I think that's a very positive sign for South Africa. We normally have our fractious relationships, that when it comes to views about science and technology, we're very similar as a country. And I thought the minister might like something like that. Now, if we look at those views that are similar and those that are very diverse, promise and reservation, trust, pride, valuing science and technology in daily lives, there's very little variation in our society. Those that have very diverse science knowledge, internet usage, use of online apps, attendance at attraction-based views. We call those views where it's a very egalitarian. Irrespective of diverse backgrounds, the public had similar or egalitarian views on value-based indicators. I'm not a sociologist or the social sciences, but those that understand the deeper things about values, and I think, and that's why I contrasted it with the US. There's a different value system towards science and technology and other things, but it's good to know as South Africans where we are very similar. Unfortunately, things that require the resource-based indicators, we're very diverse. And of course, the kind of thing is, how do we have a more equal society? Just to round up, to say that the South African, using all of those indicators, we created what is called the South African fingerprint for science and technology. And on all the indicators, it gives you both the averages as well as the variation. There were lots while writing the study, while looking at the data. It took me 2 years of living with this data. I must say there were surprises for me, things that I didn't expect, which is always very good as a researcher. And the first thing was that the views of South African public it paints a picture of a society whose views are considered, balanced, evidence-based. It's like you said, and aware and interested in science and developments. I thought it would be more varied than that. South Africans have similar views on value-based indicators and diverse on resource-based indicators. And we want to move towards a society which is higher awareness and literacy. We need to instill a culture, societal culture of curiosity, inquiry, and evidence. And this culture begins in homes and societies and carries through adulthood. This was my last slide because the DDG mentioned something about evidence-based. I'm just going to show you one other slide. We did ask about what's your trust in government's evidence-based decision-making. Now, all policy documents of government says we want to be evidence-based. And we asked these 4 questions, which we defined as using expertise and the ones of participating where the public feels. So the public feels that around 50% that government does consider the views of experts when making decisions, and government uses research results to make good decisions. So it's about half of them, so they feel that government is doing that. Where I think they don't feel government is playing their part is in consulting with them. Government meets with the public to discuss important decisions and considers the views. Now, it might be that it's happening, but they're just unaware of it. With that, I'll stop, and I'm really looking forward to listening to the responses to it and to your group discussion.